In the sweltering summer of 1944, Allied forces had broken out of Normandy and began pushing relentlessly across France. German generals, confident in their experience and well-oiled supply networks, laughed at the notion that the Americans could maintain momentum without long, secure lines of supply. Every military textbook they had studied warned that armored divisions advance only as far as their logistics allow. Yet, on the horizon, a daring and unprecedented solution was taking shape, a plan so audacious that it would defy conventional military wisdom and fuel Patton's Third Army across Europe, the Red Ball Express. The situation was dire. Rapid advances had outpaced existing supply depots, leaving fuel, ammunition, and food dangerously scarce at the front lines. Tanks stalled midfield, artillery units faced shortages of shells, and infantry soldiers scavenged for whatever they could find. Allied commanders knew that without immediate action, the liberation of Paris and the push into Germany could grind to a halt, giving the Wehrmacht precious time to regroup. That's when the idea emerged: an all-American convoy system, composed mostly of truck drivers from the segregated U.S. Army Quartermaster Corps, would form a lifeline stretching hundreds of miles, running day and night to deliver supplies directly to the front. What made the Red Ball Express extraordinary was not just its scale. It became the largest continuous truck convoy operation in history, but the audacity of its execution. Roads clogged with retreating German units, and destroyed infrastructure had to be cleared. Bridges, bombed by Allied air campaigns, needed repairs or bypasses, often built under the pressure of imminent enemy counterattacks. Yet, American ingenuity turned trucks, maps, and sheer determination into a moving artery of war, ensuring that Patton's forces could drive forward at a speed that stunned both friends and foes alike. German intelligence observed the flurry of movement and initially assumed it was routine resupply. The sheer frequency, however, puzzled them. Convoys running night and day, rarely stopping, traversing enemy territory with astonishing efficiency. Soon, frontline German commanders began whispering among themselves. How could the Americans maintain such relentless momentum when, by all accounts, their supply lines should have buckled? Their textbooks had never accounted for an army powered by trucks, driven by determination, and coordinated with an efficiency that defied conventional logic. While the Germans dismissed these convoys at first as minor logistical exercises, the impact was becoming undeniable. Patton's spearheads, fueled by endless streams of gasoline and ammunition, were rolling over positions the Germans had considered secure. Villages and towns that had been fortified as defensive hubs fell almost effortlessly because the Allies were no longer constrained by distance or scarcity. The Red Ball Express was more than a supply line. It was a revelation, a proof that speed, organization, and daring could rewrite the rules of warfare. By the end of the first week, the Americans were moving thousands of tons of supplies per day. Each truck driver became a hero in their own right, braving muddy roads, air raids, and the constant threat of German ambushes. The Red Ball Express would go on to deliver vital materials across France at a scale and pace never before seen in military history, ensuring that Patton's armored divisions could continue their blitz across Europe while German generals could only watch, bewildered, as the unstoppable American machine surged forward. As the Red Ball Express roared into its second week of operation, its impact became even more striking. The convoy system, originally conceived as a temporary measure, evolved into a finely tuned logistical marvel. Drivers, often young African-American soldiers, endured grueling schedules, 24-hour shifts with minimal rest, navigating rutted, bombed-out roads that snaked through the French countryside. Trucks laden with gasoline, ammunition, and food became lifelines, connecting makeshift depots to the front lines with almost surgical precision. Each mile covered was a defiance of conventional military theory, which held that such rapid advances would inevitably collapse under the strain of logistics. Engineers and mechanics worked tirelessly alongside the drivers, repairing broken axles, patching tires, and improvising solutions to obstacles that would have stopped lesser units in their tracks. Bridges destroyed by retreating German forces were rebuilt in days, not weeks. Convoys followed strict schedules, with drivers learning to anticipate traffic jams, mudslides, and bomb craters that littered the roads. The discipline and coordination of this operation amazed even senior Allied officers, who had doubted that such a makeshift network could sustain an advancing army. Yet, the Red Ball Express thrived on improvisation as much as on planning. Meanwhile, German reconnaissance struggled to make sense of the relentless American momentum. Officers were shocked that Patton's spearheads could strike deep into enemy territory without pausing for resupply. Intercepted reports confirmed that fuel and ammunition shortages should have stalled the Americans long ago, yet the convoys pressed on. The Germans attempted sabotage, ambushes, and artillery strikes along key roads, but the Americans adapted quickly, rerouting convoys, employing armed escorts, and using decoy trucks to confuse enemy observers. Each successful delivery to the front reinforced the illusion of an endless, invincible supply chain. The Red Ball Express was not without its dangers. Drivers faced exposure to the elements, fatigue, and the constant threat of German counterattacks. Accidents were frequent, and vehicles broke down under the relentless pace. Still, the morale among the troops was high. Drivers understood that their work directly enabled Patton's lightning strikes. Their courage under fire, combined with the ingenuity of logistics officers who managed scheduling, fuel distribution, and convoy routing, created an operational tempo that was nearly impossible to counter. By the third week, Patton's army had reached positions the Germans had considered secure. The Red Ball Express had become the backbone of Allied operations, allowing tanks and artillery to move faster than ever before. German generals, initially amused by what they considered trivial truck convoys, were forced to acknowledge that they faced a logistical adversary unlike any they had seen in previous campaigns. The Red Ball Express had rewritten the rules of supply and mobility in modern warfare, demonstrating that innovation, determination, and audacity could overcome even the most entrenched enemy assumptions. By mid-September, the scale of the Red Ball Express operation had grown staggering. Hundreds of trucks moved in synchronized waves, carrying vital supplies over hundreds of miles of French terrain. Convoy control centers were established, where officers coordinated routes, monitored fuel levels, and ensured that no vehicle was lost to accident or enemy action without swift replacement. This intricate system transformed a chaotic supply challenge into a disciplined, almost industrial operation. The roadways, once dotted with abandoned German vehicles and mined terrain, became arteries of relentless activity, each convoy a pulse sustaining the American advance. The logistical success allowed Patton to maintain momentum against German forces still reeling from the Normandy landings. Tanks and artillery arrived ahead of schedule, enabling the armored units to strike with precision, catching the enemy off guard. German commanders were astonished. Their calculations had assumed that supply lines would collapse under pressure, leaving the Americans vulnerable. Instead, the Red Ball Express kept every forward unit fed, fueled, and armed, nullifying the advantage that traditional defensive strategies could provide. Reports filtered back to Berlin describing a supply network so efficient that it seemed almost supernatural. Mechanics and drivers became unsung heroes of the campaign. Tire shortages, engine failures, and bombed-out bridges could have halted operations, yet ingenuity prevailed. Mechanics developed quick field repairs, creating spare parts from salvaged equipment, while drivers learned to navigate obstacles and enemy patrols with uncanny skill. Some convoys traveled over 500 miles in a single push, with drivers taking turns at the wheel through the night. Fatigue, frost, and mud were constant adversaries, but determination and the understanding that the success of the advance depended on their endurance kept morale high. The psychological impact on German troops was profound. Soldiers at the front lines observed endless convoys delivering supplies and reinforcements at speeds they had never imagined possible. Commanders had expected to see the American advance falter without proper logistics, but instead, they faced relentless pressure and rapid, coordinated assaults. The sight of endless trucks, combined with the apparent invulnerability of Patton's armored divisions, sowed confusion and eroded confidence. Many German units began to believe they were facing an enemy who could draw resources from nowhere, giving rise to myths about supernatural American efficiency. Meanwhile, Allied intelligence monitored the Red Ball Express closely. Lessons learned from this operation informed future campaigns, emphasizing the importance of mobile supply lines and the integration of logistics into strategic planning. Patton himself praised the drivers and mechanics repeatedly, recognizing that their tireless work was as critical to victory as the skill of frontline soldiers. The operation demonstrated a new dimension of warfare. Success depended not only on firepower and tactics, but on the ability to innovate, adapt, and sustain momentum through superior logistics. By early October, the Red Ball Express had become legendary among American units and feared by German forces. Supply convoys operated almost around the clock, with drivers rotating shifts to maintain constant movement. The roads, once chaotic and impassable, had been cleared, repaired, and organized with military precision. Engineers laid temporary bridges over rivers, patched bombed-out roadways, and even established detours around contested zones, ensuring uninterrupted passage. The ability to maintain this tempo allowed Patton's divisions to conduct rapid thrusts into enemy territory, often striking positions that German commanders assumed were secure. Each successful convoy reinforced the mythos of American operational efficiency. German reports described endless columns of trucks, carrying fuel, ammunition, food, and medical supplies, often arriving before the frontline units even requested them. This created a psychological advantage as much as a logistical one. German officers who had previously mocked the U.S. supply strategy were now forced to reconsider their assessments. They witnessed firsthand that American combat power was not merely a function of soldiers and tanks, but the seamless integration of logistics into battlefield strategy. Meanwhile, challenges persisted. Weather turned roads to mud, leading to vehicle breakdowns and occasional losses. Enemy snipers and artillery targeted key choke points, attempting to disrupt the supply flow. Yet the ingenuity of Red Ball Express personnel mitigated these threats. Convoy coordinators rerouted trucks, repair crews worked through nights to restore damaged vehicles, and air reconnaissance identified risks before they could halt progress. This combination of foresight, adaptability, and sheer human effort kept the arteries of supply flowing despite adversity. Soldiers on the front lines quickly recognized the critical role of the Red Ball Express. Units that might have faced shortages of fuel or ammunition found themselves continuously reinforced, allowing for sustained offensive operations. Tanks that previously would have been grounded due to lack of fuel remained mobile, artillery units could fire without pause, and infantry divisions received necessary rations and medical support. The practical impact was profound. What could have been a slow, grinding campaign instead became a rapid, relentless advance that kept German forces off balance and retreating under pressure. The operation also had a transformative effect on military doctrine. Commanders across the Allied forces took note of the Red Ball Express as a model for integrating logistics with operational planning. The experience underscored that modern warfare required mobility, speed, and the ability to sustain forces deep in enemy territory. Patton's success was not merely in brilliant tactics or aggressive maneuvers, but in creating a system where logistical excellence enabled strategic and tactical brilliance. The Red Ball Express had proven that in modern war, the fastest gun is not always the decisive factor. It is the one best supplied. By November, the Red Ball Express had firmly cemented its place in military history. Patton's rapid advances had created operational shock among German commanders, who struggled to comprehend how American forces maintained their momentum despite their initial expectations of logistical failure. Reports from the front described columns of trucks stretching for miles, seemingly endless streams of supplies that enabled armor and infantry to operate continuously without the pauses that typically plagued advancing armies. The human element behind this logistical marvel cannot be overstated. Thousands of drivers, many of them African-American soldiers in segregated units, displayed exceptional dedication and courage. They navigated dangerous roads under constant threat of enemy fire, mechanical failures, and adverse weather conditions. Their efforts were grueling. Shifts lasted up to 20 hours, often with little rest. But their commitment ensured that tanks stayed fueled, artillery kept firing, and soldiers remained fed and equipped. Without them, Patton's blitzkrieg-style advances would have stalled, potentially allowing German forces to regroup and counterattack. Beyond immediate operational success, the Red Ball Express had strategic consequences. It demonstrated that logistics could directly influence battlefield outcomes, a lesson that resonated with Allied planners and shaped future operations. The rapid resupply system allowed the Allies to maintain pressure across multiple fronts, ultimately contributing to the accelerated collapse of German defenses in Western Europe. Patton's victories, enabled by the Red Ball Express, illustrated the decisive interplay between supply chains and combat effectiveness, reinforcing that wars are not won by firepower alone, but by the seamless orchestration of men, material, and planning. In retrospect, the Red Ball Express stands as a testament to ingenuity, determination, and the often overlooked heroes of war. While generals and tanks captured headlines, the drivers, mechanics, and planners behind the supply lines quietly ensured victory. Their relentless efforts turned what was once derided as an improbable logistical experiment into a linchpin of operational success, forever altering perceptions of what was possible in modern warfare. The story of the Red Ball Express reminds us that military brilliance is multidimensional. Tactical audacity, strategic foresight, and logistical mastery all converge to create outcomes that shape history. When German generals laughed at the supposed inadequacies of American supply chains, they underestimated not only the resourcefulness of Allied forces, but also the critical truth that in war, speed and sustainability often outweigh raw numbers or firepower. By sustaining Patton's blitz and keeping the army in constant motion, the Red Ball Express became an unsung hero of the Allied victory in Europe. A vivid example of how extraordinary organization and human dedication can turn skepticism into triumph.